Nityalila Pravistram Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Kota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Mathura Dham Ki Jai. Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gaura Premanand. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaura Premanand. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Canto 9, Chapter 21, the Dynasty of Bharat. And we're on text 22. What's on the board? Anything? What is that? 25. All right. Because there's practically no purports. There's only one purport. So when we get to that verse, we'll do that responsively. So text 22, then I'll just read the English. From Ajamida came a son named Brihadishu. From Brihadishu came a son named Brihadanu. From Brihadanu a son named Brihatkaya. And from Brihatkaya a son named Jayadrath. Text 23. The son of Jayadrath was Vishada, and his son was Syanajit. The sons of Syanajit were Ruchasrava, Dridadanu, Kasya, and Vatsa. Text 24. The son of Ruchasrava was Para, and the sons of Para were Pritusena and Nipa. Nipa had 100 sons. Text 25. King Nipa begot a son named Brahmadatta through the womb of his wife Kritvi, who was the daughter of Shuka. And Brahmadatta, who was a great yogi, begot a son named Vishvaksena through the womb of his wife Saraswati. So there's a purport here. We'll read that out. Okay. Purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. The Shuka mentioned here is different from the Shukadev Goswami who spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam. Shukadev Goswami, the son of Vyasa, is described in great detail in the Brahma Vaivarta Purana. There it is said that Vyasadeva maintained the daughter of Jabali as his wife, and that after they performed penances together for many years, he placed his seed in her womb. The child remained in the womb of his mother for 12 years, and when the father asked the son to come out, the son replied that he would not come out unless he were completely liberated from the influence of Maya. Vyasadeva then assured the child that he would not be influenced by Maya. But the child did not believe his father, for the father was still attached to his wife and children. Vyasadeva then went to Dwarka and informed the personality of Godhead about his problem. And the personality of Godhead, at Vyasadeva's request, went to Vyasadeva's cottage, where he assured the child in the womb that he would not be influenced by Maya. Thus assured, the child came out, but he immediately went away as a paribrajacharya. When the father, very much aggrieved, began to follow his saintly boy, Sukadeva Goswami, the boy created a duplicate Sukadeva, who later entered into family life. Therefore, the Sukha Kanya, or the daughter of Sukadeva, as mentioned in this verse, is the daughter of that duplicate or imitation Sukadeva. The original Sukadeva was a lifelong brahmachari. King Nipa begot a son named Brahmadatta through the womb of his wife Kritvi, who was the daughter of Shuka. And Brahmadatta was a great yogi, begot a son named Vishvaksena through the womb of his wife Sarasvati. So some very amazing activities in relation here to Shukadeva Goswami. Just let me change my glasses. It's better. He was the result of the coupling of Vyasadeva and his wife Jabala, and they did penances and austerities for a long time before they attempted to have a child. So in that way, then when the penance was done and the wife was impregnated, then this great soul, Sukadeva Goswami, took his birth from that womb. So here it mentions that after a short while, because he was very cautious how he dealt with even Vyasadeva, his own father, then he wandered off and refused to participate in any activities to do with family and wife and family. Rather, he created, to keep them happy, he created a duplicate Sukadeva. And from that duplicate Sukadeva, Prabhupada says, then the dynasty continued, whereas the other Sukadeva Goswami remained a brahmachari. So it sounds very highly unusual, but actually Sukadeva, when he was in the womb, he was at least Brahman realized. He wasn't fully realized, at least in terms of his relationship with Krishna. But he was in the womb, he knew what was outside, and he felt more secure that his spiritual position would be upheld if he stayed within the womb and didn't come out, because that way he wouldn't have to deal with what he thought was Maya. That means doing what his father tells him, doing what the mother tells him, getting educated, getting his sacred thread, doing all the performances of Varnashram, which are meant for purification. He was already pure, but he didn't want to come out just in case anything adverse happened and his spiritual position was affected. So, of course, this was naturally quite a consternation for Vyasadeva. He didn't know what to do. This boy tried to persuade the boy to come out, and he actually instructed him in the essence of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But the essence that he received was not the full Bhagavatam, and it didn't contain the sections which deal with the real rasa that a pure soul manifests when he knows who Krishna is and he knows his own position as Krishna's servant. When we get to the active stage of devotional service, if Krishna's pleased with us, then he manifests himself, and then we become enlightened from within. So he was not yet that enlightened. From the information that he received from Vyasadeva, he got the essence of the Bhagavatam, but not the... it's all right. But he didn't get the information which would establish him on this rasa platform, where the real taste is. Once you get to the rasa, what's that, rasavajam? I can't remember the Sanskrit, but it's explained in Bhagavad Gita that the rasa is the nectar of knowing one's relationship with Krishna. And once you know that relationship, you can engage in eternal pastimes with him, pleasure pastimes. So this Sukadeva was not yet up to that platform where he could engage with Krishna in his rasa. He was freed from material influence, but he was not yet fully situated spiritually. So Vyasadeva could not persuade him to come out, because he knew, he told his father, you're wearing white cloth, you're a householder, you have a wife, and so how can I trust that I won't be affected by Maya if I come out at your bidding? So he sat it out for 12 years. Father became very concerned. What's happening with this boy is not moving. And of course, what to speak about a mother that has to carry the child for 12 years when it's only supposed to be 9 months. So the solution was to go to see Lord Krishna. And when Krishna heard the situation, he knew the answer. So he went personally to see the wife and Vyasadeva, and he spoke to Sukadeva Goswami in the womb. When Sukadeva Goswami heard Krishna speak, then he immediately understood who he was. He understood the principle of rasa, or relationship, and activity in Krishna consciousness. So immediately when he understood that, then all right, no problem. So he agreed, all right, I'll come out now. Because Krishna promised him, you'll always be in remembrance of me, you'll never forget me, and you'll never be affected by the three modes of material nature, which are my energy anyway. So if one realizes Krishna, realizes his relationship with Krishna, it's because Krishna withdraws the veiling effect of the three modes of material nature. Then the soul can see actually in reality and truth who he is, who is Krishna, and what his relationship is. So naturally, when he came out of the womb, then he wasn't interested in anything else except Krishna Katha. But at the same time, he had not yet heard the full Bhagavatam. So that had to be instructed to him. Once he got that, and he understood this principle of service to Krishna as an eternal principle, Sanatana Dharma, then he was very happy within himself. He didn't need any contact with anybody else because he was always filled with Krishna consciousness. So he wandered off. But Vyasadeva, he had other duties to perform. He ran after him, don't leave yet, we haven't done the Upasana, we haven't done this, we haven't done that. Sukadeva Goswami didn't care, he was off, gone. So then what to do for Vyasadeva? Therefore Sukadeva came up with this solution. He cloned himself. Nowadays they talk about cloning. Yeah, they get some cell from some dead dog or something, and then from that cell, the information that's contained within the cells of the body, then they try and manipulate that and produce a new dog or cow, or they've done a sheep and several other animals. And it's supposed to be an exact replica of the animal that first supplied the cell. So they're trying duplication, but that's already here in the Bhagavatam. We see in Krishna's pastimes when he went on tour, he met two great devotees, Baulashva and what's his name? Shrutadev. So they were living in the city of Mithila. So they were inviting the Lord to come to their homes. He came to Mithila, and there were the two of them. So both of them came at the same time and requested Krishna to come and bless their home. The system is still prevalent in India, where a saintly person, if he's in the district, the householders know, if the saintly person comes, then the whole house becomes purified. So they want to have their houses purified, their families purified, their activities purified. Same thing with the idea of going to bathe in the Ganga or in the Jamuna. It's not exactly the water itself which is purifying, but it's the fact that the saintly persons gather in such places and speak and narrate the, Krishna Katha. That's the purifier. So people, they like to go and bathe, but it's said that going and bathing in the Ganga is useless unless you hear from the saintly persons that are gathered there. So in the same way, anyway, Krishna, he was on tour, and he got this invite, and along with Krishna were many great sages and saints. At least a dozen of them are mentioned there. And wherever Krishna went, they were following him. So there was this huge entourage. And King Baulasva, he was a very rich person. He was a king. And Shrutadev, he was very poor. He practically had barely enough to eat for himself and his wife. But still they were both great devotees of Krishna. So to satisfy the two of them, they had asked at the same time, which one's going to go first? Krishna replicated himself, and all the sages replicated themselves. And simultaneously, Krishna went to Shrutadev's place and Baulasva's place. Shrutadev and Baulasva each thought that Krishna is only with me. He didn't go to Baulasva's place, he came to my place. Baulasva was thinking, Krishna is only with me. He didn't go to Shrutadev's place, he came to my place. So it's a bit like the Rasa Leela. When the gopis are dancing with Krishna, they all thought that Krishna's only dancing with me. Actually, he's dancing with thousands and millions of gopis. But each one is thinking, no, he's favoring me. So in the same way, this idea of replication, it's an established fact in Krishna Leela and in the material world amongst his devotees. So these sages and saints had that power that they could follow Krishna, and if he went to two places at once, they also could go to both places at once. So in that way, Krishna was very merciful. So Shukadev Goswami then, here we read that the original Shukadev Goswami, he wandered off because he was a Paramahamsa and he wasn't going to get involved in any kind of material business, and at the same time being conscious of the responsibilities that his father Vyasadeva had laid on his plate, so to speak. He didn't want to disappoint him, so he made a duplicate Sukadev, and that duplicate Sukadev, he later on got married and had a child. So not much is said about that, but the real, I wouldn't say the real, they're all real, but the Sukadev that came out first, of course then he had a destiny to fulfill as well. Not that he wasn't doing anything, but in his wanderings around the earth, he was appreciating the manifestation of the spiritual and material energies. And finally, of course, by the direction of Krishna, we see in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that I direct the wanderings of all living beings. So Sukadev Goswami, by the direction of Krishna within, he was brought to the place on the banks of the Ganges where Maharaj Parikshit had just sat down to meditate on what was to be done or what was not to be done now that the time of death was approaching. So as soon as Parikshit Maharaj went to the Ganga to sit down, he accepted the curse of the Brahmana boy. He knew, now I've got 7 days left. He immediately gave up all of his activities and he went to the banks of the Ganges to meditate, but he wasn't exactly sure. He knew, but it needed reinforcing. So he wasn't exactly sure what was to be done or not done in terms of leaving his body in a very short while. So the word went out through the transcendental airwaves. Prabhupada describes it, sometimes it's like on the radio. You're in one place, but as soon as you speak, the transmission goes everywhere. Everybody hears it. So as soon as Parikshit Maharaj sat down, then all of a sudden all these great sages and some incarnations, various incarnations, came to the banks of the Ganges to be with Parikshit Maharaj for the last 7 days, because they knew that this was a very special event and that there would be some wonderful katha talk, and that they also would relish that and relish the activities of King Parikshit in leaving his body due to the bite of this extraordinary snake bird, whatever that actually means. I've never really been able to figure out what a snake bird is, but anyway, that was the plan. So once the sages were all gathered together, they also weren't exactly sure. There was no real consensus now what Pariksit Maharaj should do and what he shouldn't do. So whilst they're all thinking like that, and Sukadeva Goswami came wandering in. He'd been wandering all over the earth and not paying much attention to anything. He was relishing his rasa with Krishna within. But now he came upon all these great sages and saints, and he understood from Krishna that now this is the duty that I want you to perform. Not the kind of duty that the duplicate was performing, which was Varnashram, but the kind of duty that a devotee performs, which is directly in relationship with Krishna and enlivening due to the exchange of rasa. So this was the duty that Krishna gave to the original Sukadeva. You go and you speak with King Pariksit, you talk about my pastimes, my appearance, my activities, my philosophy, etc., etc. That will liberate him. It will also complete your education in terms of your Sanatana Dharma, and everybody will be happy. So this is the background to Sukadeva Goswami and this duplicate. The duplicate, one supposes, if he's actually a duplicate, then he must be exactly the same. Not that he's Prabhupada used the word imitation there in one sense, but not in the sense of it being false. He was actually another form of Sukadeva Goswami. But in order to achieve all the different purposes, then he split himself, if you like, or manipulated the material elements and produced another identical form of himself, identical in every way, except that they had different duties to perform. So another point here also is that because we're getting to this, we've been reading about this list of names, it seems practically endless. The Bhagavatam has these genealogical tables. That's to set the scene for the penultimate appearance of Krishna. And then all the 10th canto, of course, is about his activities. So in the 9th canto, a little bit in the 8th canto, there's a lot of names that are being given, a list of names. Prabhupada, when he was sitting in Vrindavan and all of his material activities had been wound up by Krishna, Prabhupada said, he wrote this poem and he said, now I'm sitting here in Vrindavan and I'm thinking about this family and friends and all the different activities, and I'm laughing because it's simply a list of names. All that is left of this family life and business and so much endeavor. Now when Prabhupada was in his 60s, when he moved to Vrindavan and stayed at the Radha Damodar Mandir, he was reflecting on all of his activities from birth up until that point. He said, and what is there? Simply a list of names, that's all. Everybody else has gone. Where's my dear father? Where's my dear mother? Where's brothers and sisters and so many things? Gone. So that was to clear the decks, so to speak. Prabhupada was not interested in any of these kinds of activities anymore. He had one activity which was paramount, and that was writing the Bhagavatam and preparing himself to follow the instructions of his spiritual master, go to the West, travel around the world and instruct people in the science of Krishna consciousness. So the list of names were not helpful, but his association with the Vaishnavas was crucial. So we read about Prabhupada being in Vrindavan at the Radha Damodar, and several times his Guru Maharaj appeared to him and gave him instructions about preaching in the West. And also, before he took sannyas and after he took sannyas, his Guru Maharaj appeared before him. So Prabhupada was getting prepared to preach, to follow this instruction that his Guru Maharaj gave him. And to do that, he had to give up all other contact with so-called family and friends. I was reading the other day in a conversation that Prabhupada had with, I guess he was some kind of a life member, I think in Bombay, in the early days of ISKCON in India. And Prabhupada was preaching, and telling these. There was a few people that were coming around. This one man was there, and he was in agreement with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada requesting them to do something to spread Krishna consciousness and help the Krishna consciousness movement. But he said that this fellow said, that's nice. He said, but first of all, I have to get my daughter married. So then Prabhupada immediately, grabbed the point. He said, yes, this is the problem. I love Krishna consciousness. I can give you lots of advice, but when it comes to doing something, I have to get my daughter married. He said, I also went through that, because Prabhupada had his youngest child was Bhaktilata, the youngest daughter was Bhaktilata Day, and she was not married. Prabhupada was very strongly feeling the pull and getting instructions internally to go and preach. And he wanted to try to set up his family and get the girls married, at least that's the duty of a father, and then he would be free to go. So he tried, but whatever he did, he couldn't find a match. He said actually that he had found one family that had a very nice boy. He was making the arrangements for Bhaktilata to marry this boy, and then somehow or another Prabhupada's wife, Radharani Day, she put a spoke in the wheels, as they say. She somehow or another thwarted it, and she wouldn't agree that this was the right boy. So from what I've understood, this happened 2 or 3 times. And then Prabhupada got fed up with the whole business. He was very strongly getting this indication he should retire from everything and go and preach. So he said yes. He told this man in reply, he said, yes, I have to get my daughter married. He said, I also had that. He said, then I thought, to hell with it. He used those words. To hell with the daughter getting married. Now I have to go. So he actually left home. He didn't get his youngest daughter married. She remained unmarried her whole life. She just left her body a couple of years ago. And she never got married. Because Prabhupada had a few comments to make on that one of the reasons why she didn't get married was because as long as she wasn't married, then her mother had a maidservant to help her out running the family. So she also was not very active in trying to get her daughter married because she saw, I don't have to pay any money, I've got automatically a servant to help me, and that was basically the situation in Prabhupada's own family. Anyway, the point is that there was a certain stage that Prabhupada got to where he said, okay, enough is enough, to hell with the marriage. I have to go and preach, I have to follow the instructions of my spiritual family and not my material one. So that's the consideration for a Vaishnava, that they're more concerned with their advancement on the spiritual platform than in just merely doing one's duty very nicely. Yeah, we've read in the Bhagavatam there just previously about Varnashrama. That's nice. It's a that points out what the duties are according to the Varnas and Ashramas. But it's not transcendental. And if one is already on the transcendental platform, like Sukadeva Goswami, there's no need to pay any heed to the Varnashram system, all the rituals and rites that go along with that. They're for purification, but if you're already pure, then you don't need to do it anymore. So then what's to be done? If you're pure and you're freed from your Varnashram obligations, what's to be done? And that means that you have to seek out now what your eternal relationship is with the Supreme Lord. It's unhampered, or it should not be hindered by these external material considerations. It blossoms within the heart when one finally makes the decision to give up all connection with the material world. When we make that decision, then we cannot be touched by Maya. And then Krishna becomes very pleased, and he begins to manifest himself within the heart of his devotees and bring us to the stage of full absorption in Krishna consciousness, in Krishna seva. So this way, then the Bhagavatam has to be understood correctly. In 1977, Prabhupada came here to Mayapur in mid-February, and we had a long conversation on February the 14th, 1977, about the establishment of Varnashram. So Prabhupada, although himself he had no need of it, and any pure devotee has no real need of it. But he made the point that, yes, we have many devotees, we're supposed to be Vaishnavas, and from Prabhupada's books we'd understood that Varnashram was secondary consideration to the performance of devotional service, but still, Prabhupada was pushing us, start Varnashram. He had previously, a couple of years before, started talking about these self-sufficient farming communities where we could practice and develop Varnashram. But it was very difficult to understand exactly how to do that in the current industrial enterprise of this material realm. So Prabhupada was saying that actually, yes, as devotees we don't need to practice Varnashram, but we're doing it for others. He said, apart from that, he recognized that many of my devotees or disciples, they're not even chanting their 16 rounds. So you can't say that they're Vaishnavas. Actually, they have to get more purified, and therefore they should practice the Varnashram system themselves on these farms. But even if one is already cognizant and fully aware of devotional service and has no need to do it himself, Varnashram, he may do it in order to show an example to others that don't know. So that was something that Prabhupada considered. Just like Sukadeva Goswami, he heard the transcendental information, first from Vyasadeva, then from Krishna. But it wasn't till he actually started speaking that that what he had heard really became nectarian. Yeah, what's that? Nigama kalpaturu galitam phalam sukhamukaram ritadrava samyutam pibita bhagavatam rasamalayam muhoraho rasikabhuvi babukaha rasa amalayam, purified. Yeah, amala means completely pure and spotless. So this Bhagavatam is the spotless Purana, which gives us information about the rasa. So when Sukadeva began speaking and interacting with others and giving them instruction, or revealing aspects of Krishna consciousness to them, that means all the sages that were gathered on the banks of the river, that was where the real nectar began to flow. It was nectar. It was so nectarine just to hear from Krishna himself that he came out from the womb. But to actually fully manifest the taste, the rasa of his relationship with Krishna, he had to use it for helping others. This is the point. That he had to speak it and interact with others that didn't know as much and see their devotional service to Krishna blossom also. And that, of course, is the final conclusion of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, he says that anybody who speaks or repeats this message to others is very, very dear to me. So keeping Krishna consciousness for yourself is one thing. That's nice. I mean, that's where the point of perfection, but there's perfection, more perfection, and most perfect. And the most perfect is to go out and distribute this knowledge, as Sukadeva Goswami did when he went to the banks of the Ganges, and see that everybody is informed about this transcendental life, so that they can get out of, the drudge and the ignorance of being in the material world. We're here because we're too much influenced by Tamagun and Rajagun, especially in Kali Yuga. These two influences, the lower modes of material nature, cause the destruction of the advantage of human life. Prabhupada said that if you take like a stick of sandalwood and you start rubbing that, then you get some flavors, some senses there. So in the same way, Krishna consciousness, if you grind it up and make it into a nice paste, or something, decorate yourself with it, or decorate the deities with it, then it becomes very, very wonderful. But if you don't do anything with it, then it's just the same as any other old piece of wood. So we have to make use of Krishna's instructions. We have to make use of the instructions of Sukadeva Goswami, which he passed on. Sutta Goswami was there. He's the main speaker actually of the Bhagavatam that we have. So in that way then, we have to take advantage. If we don't do that, and we go through this human life and not properly utilize this human form, then we lose everything. Yeah, if we remain in the material world, who knows where we'll go. Yeah, we have human form now, but we're not necessarily going to have that next lifetime. Could be anything. Yeah, just like Bharat Maharaj accidentally thought about the deer that he'd had in his ashram. So when he left his body, all of a sudden, he was thinking of the deer, but not Krishna. So then he had to wait 3 more lifetimes before he could actually get out of the modes of material nature. So we have to be very, very careful, keep ourselves in contact with Krishna at every moment. We have to situate ourselves in the mode of goodness. Urdhvam, it's going up. So anybody, Sattva, anybody who's in the Sattvic mode, Urdhvam gets chanted. He gets elevated, he gets promoted. That promotion means clarification of the consciousness, where things actually begin to make sense again. And the forgetfulness that we've had as, tiny jivatmas in this material world, that begins to clear up. But it only comes from being on the platform at the beginning of the platform of the mode of goodness, and then one starts to study the scriptures, it makes sense. You get enlightened. So this is the idea, that Krishna consciousness can be attained in this human form of life. That's what all this talking is going on about. Get out of Maya. I guess everybody's had the occasion sometimes when they've done something wrong or they're living in the temple, some argument. You're in Maya, Prabhu. Get out of Maya. This is actually our business, to get out of Maya and go back home, back to Godhead. So all of the know-how, how to do that, that's all there in the Bhagavatam. But we still have to be properly situated in order to appreciate the teachings of the Bhagavatam. I remember 1985, I was talking with one lady. She was a famous pop star, actually. Big, very famous. And she was trying to understand the Bhagavatam, but she was just on the verge. Her group had just started making it really big. They were top headliners. They were earning millions of dollars and pounds. And she told me that she had tried reading the Bhagavatam, but she couldn't understand a single word in it. And then at the same time she said also, just now when I'm actually, all the hard work that we put into becoming, rich and famous, just now it's bearing fruit. Now you're telling me that I have to give it all up, that it doesn't belong to us? That was, so we were trying to preach to her Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam. She couldn't understand a word. She was chanting for some time, actually. She liked the chanting. And a little bit of understanding of the Bhagavad Gita. But with the Bhagavatam, nothing. Couldn't understand a single word in it. So she went back to, being a famous pop star. But what does she lose? She loses the chance to go back home, back to Godhead. And that kind of lifestyle, which is driven by Tamagun and Rajagun, then it's highly likely that you fall down. Ado gachanti tamasaha. Ado, you go down. Jaganya guna vrichisa. Jaganya means horrible. So if you're in the mode of ignorance, you live a horrible life, horrible activities, and the result is that you fall down, and who knows how far you'll fall. Maybe become a dog or an ant or a worm in stool, who can tell. So we have to be very, very careful. We're urged by Krishna and his representatives, Sukadeva Goswami, that we should very seriously take up this practice of hearing and chanting. That's the key to it all. Hearing and chanting. You hear something from Krishna or his reps, you speak the same thing to someone else, but then this Shuka Rasa, the parrot, that's the example. Shukadeva Goswami, Shuka means parrot. So he received the mango, a mango of nectar, all about Krishna. And by his repeating it, as compared to the parrot, they bite into the ripe mangoes and they relish even more. The taste is already there, but it becomes even more tasteful when the devotees begin to speak about it and act on it. So in that way then, that was Sukadeva Goswami. He was bringing the nectar which would restore us back to a position of immortality. No more nonsense. Yeah? No more tamagun, no more rajagun. Even sattvagun, you transcend that. So it's not much, in one sense, just to sit and chant Hare Krishna, but we've all experienced that unless we keep with the association of devotees, then that fear comes immediately, that you may forget Krishna. So Shukadeva Goswami, by his actions, is showing how a devotee should behave. He should hear, he should put himself in the right position, and then he should go out and distribute the knowledge to whoever he can capture and fill his ears with it. Okay, so I'm going to finish at this point, 8:45. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Keep it short and precise.
The other day you were telling me that Prabhupada said that a devotee makes advancement when he's able to carry others in Krishna consciousness. And today you were mentioning about how we have to kind of break away from just being advanced ourselves and preaching to others. And we were hearing also that a devotee's, his merit is how many other Vaishnavas he makes.
His merit?
Yeah, like you can judge a devotee if you're able to make other people into devotees.
Right.
So how does somebody get beyond just their own personal development and spiritual life and into what they're actually making other people into devotees and bringing them to Krishna?
Well, because Lord Chaitanya does say that you have to be Krishna conscious yourself if you want to give it to others. So the first concern is, am I following everything? Am I practicing my Krishna consciousness nicely? That's the first consideration. Then from that platform, you can reach out to others. Just like Srila Prabhupada, because he was completely fixed in his own Krishna consciousness. And even though he's sometimes in the Bowery or other places in New York, he was living with one young man, completely crazy, drugged up to the eyeballs. Prabhupada was living in the same space as this boy. And the boy was keeping meat in the refrigerator. Prabhupada had to buy his vegetables and keep them in the same shelving. So many horrible things that he had to do. But he was unaffected by the Tamagun, Rajagun, because he was completely self-situated in Krishna consciousness. So he's able to do that. We're not. We're not on that platform. So, or at least most of us are not. Maybe one or two are now. But what we have to do is first be attentive to our own Krishna consciousness and practices. Make sure that we're doing those properly. And then, because Prabhupada set our society up as a preaching movement, educational movement, then we can impart that knowledge that we've understood ourselves to others and feel encouraged ourselves, enlivened ourselves. And our own Krishna consciousness will grow from doing that. And we all have that experience, at least those who've gone out distributing books or prasadam or just chanting. When you perform the activity and you see someone else reacting very positively to that Sankirtan activity, you feel so enlivened yourself. Yeah, just to give something to someone else. Yeah, we're not takers, we're givers. That's another thing that Prabhupada always stressed, that it's not India's business to take and come to the Western countries and beg, oh, give us this, give us that, we have no money. Prabhupada used to say very often that it's the business of the Vaishnavas is to go out and give Krishna consciousness to as many people as possible. And in that way then, you were saying, how do we judge who's doing that successfully? You'll see things by the result. Yeah, what's that verse? Phalena parichiyate. You judge a thing by the fruit that it produces. So, if we see lots of shining faces and shaved heads and saris and tilak, oh, if we see the holy name as being vibrated on the tongue, we become very enlivened. This is what we want. This is the whole purpose of our Krishna consciousness movement. So, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, because he was the one who really pushed the preaching of Krishna consciousness. He learned that from Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but he was the one who actually organized the mutts, made a structure to the preaching. And because of his pushing, then Krishna consciousness is spread all over the world, done by his dearest disciples. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur wanted us to preach. It was the time, after 500 years of Lord Chaitanya's appearance. Now is the time. If you look at the life of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he was born in about 1837, I think. So if you look at his activities, he was the one who started this idea of going to other countries in the world and utilizing the only one thing that the British gave the Indians, which was of any use, and that was the language. Because the British Empire was spread all over the world, Bhaktivinoda Thakur understood now is the time when this prophecy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu can be fulfilled. Prachiva Chaita Chaita To Nagaradiganam Sabatra Prachahoibe Moranam. Yeah. He had that vision. So he transferred that determination and enlightenment to his son Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. He organized temples, 64 temples, and all Prabhupada did in one sense was that he repeated exactly what his spiritual master had given to him. But I say all that Prabhupada did, but that all is everything. When you've understood the Guru's instruction and desire, and you fully execute that with all enthusiasm, and you have no time for anything else, that's the kind of all that one can do. We don't look to do other things that the Guru has not given us. We do what we've been told to do, which is to go and preach. And we've seen by example what that involves. It means total surrender. If Prabhupada was not totally surrendered, he could not have done what he did. He had other God brothers that went to Europe in the 1930s. They came back with nothing. On a morning walk one time in Melbourne, I asked Srila Prabhupada, I was thinking about that Prabhupada's God brothers had gone to the West and they tried to preach. They had stayed there for 2 or 3 years, but come back empty-handed. But they had the same scripture, they had the same spiritual master, they had the same opportunity, if you like, but they couldn't do anything with it. But now Prabhupada has come, and all the things that his Guru wanted, he's been able to manifest. So it puzzled me, and I asked Prabhupada this question that, well, how do we understand it? I mean, your God brothers they had the same facilities, and they were sincere. And as soon as I said the word sincere, Prabhupada stopped me. He said, they were never sincere. So that was a symptom, that they tried to do it but couldn't do it. That means there was a symptom of something that it was not, being done correctly. And what was not being done correctly was that they were not totally surrendered. And therefore they could not act as a via media. Whereas Prabhupada was completely, absolutely, fully surrendered. Make me dance, make me dance, make me dance. That was his point. And because of that full surrender, he could tolerate so much difficulty, no help from anyone, and still come out successful. Even the karmis, they're surprised. Prabhupada, there's a paper or something that somebody wrote, an article about it was an article, 10 examples of people that have become successful in later life, not when they were young, when they were old. And Prabhupada was on that list. This was in a newspaper. That only at the age of 70 onwards, Bhaktivedanta Swami then, created this worldwide movement in only 10 years and at such an advanced age. So they were very impressed with that. They recognized that that's something extraordinary. And now we're getting to the same age that Prabhupada was, when he first went to the West. We have some of his disciples now. We're getting in our late 60s and early 70s, and we can see what a difficult thing it is. We rely on, the arrangements that ISKCON provides for everything. We rely, but Prabhupada, he had no reliance on anything. He had nothing to rely on. He had no opulences that he could use in Krishna's service, except his own full surrender. And because he offered himself, make me do as you choose, Krishna worked through him and created this outreach that we call ISKCON. So we have to see things very carefully, how we're doing it, whether we're doing it for the right reasons. And if we're doing it for the right reasons, the result will come. There will be new devotees made. That's the whole point about Lord Chaitanya's movement, is to increase the number of devotees. But if we just read about it but we don't act on it, or I like this bit but I don't like that bit, that's not full surrender. There's an example of a chicken. Ada what is it? Ada kukura. Anyway, I've forgotten the Sanskrit, but a chicken, it gives eggs out. It gives. Arda Kukuti Nyaya, yes, thank you. Half-hen logic, good. Prabhupada told us about half-hen logic. Means you've got a chicken, from one end comes an egg. From the other, at the other end you have to feed it so many grains. So that costs something, but the egg you don't have to pay for. It just comes out. So faulty logic is that, well, this end costs some money, so chop off the head, you don't have to feed it anymore, and you're still expecting to get an egg out the other end? No. So that's foolishness. So Prabhupada made it very clear that you can only get this kind of empowerment when you accept all the responsibilities, when things are going well or when things are going badly. Actually, everything is in Krishna's control. So a person who enters into sometimes reverse conditions of life, but he's a pure devotee, he doesn't mind that. All right, there's some difficulty. Still, Krishna wants me to do this, I'll do it. Whereas somebody else who's not as pure or as determined, oh, this has become so difficult, it's such a slog, I can't complete it, and so they stop. And that's not what Krishna wants. That's not what Prabhupada wants. Whether we're, in public, in the vision of the ordinary people, whether we're becoming successful or not successful, that's not our concern. Again, the same morning walk in Melbourne when I was asking about his godbrothers, I was making that mistake of trying to measure our success with the number of, people that were coming to the temple and joining. And there was only a few of us at that time, 74, 75. There was only like 20 or 30 devotees in Melbourne, and the same number in Sydney, Brisbane, like that. So not a big yatra, very small. But we were at that time the number one book distribution temple in the medium temple category in the whole world. Just a few little Aussies running around selling books, and Prabhupada was very, very pleased with that. And he came to Rath Yatra because we got to be number one in book distribution. So I was thinking, we're selling so many books, but where are the people that are supposed to come from that? I asked Prabhupada, we go out every day, we sell thousands of your books, but hardly anybody's coming to the temple. Prabhupada was a little sharp. He said, that is not our concern. He said, our concern is to just do your duty. Distribute. Our spiritual master has told us to distribute books. You distribute books. You don't do anything else. Just do your duty. The result will be up to Krishna. Now we see, after 50 years of ISKCON, what has flourished from what was originally a tiny, tiny, bothersome little, cult of weird people. Now we have, Radhanath Maharaj giving talks in the Houses of Parliament, the British government. We have meetings with the Prime Minister. I mean, so, the turnaround in the 50 years that ISKCON's been in existence is completely unbelievable. It's only by Krishna's mercy that we could do that. But that mercy is Prabhupada's mercy. That's what Prabhupada was giving us. Krishna's mercy comes to us through the pure devotee. So by Prabhupada's mercy, we're becoming a little bit successful. And if we keep on maintaining the standards that Prabhupada gave us, then for sure this movement will spread all over the world. It will. There's no question of it. So we don't have to count numbers. That's not our business. We're not counting how many temples. We're not counting how many devotees. Counting how many books are going out, that's good. Yeah, you can always increase that. But the results from that preaching, we leave in Krishna's hands. We may or may not be successful. We may or may not be noticed and heard. But if we just follow the instructions of Prabhupada and Krishna, we are already successful. All right. Okay, it's 9 o'clock. We'll finish there. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.